should we be more concerned about Italian banks? There's a huge swathe of bad debts out there.
Oh, undoubtedly. If we think about Brexit, if we think about sanctions against Portugal and Spain, and we think about the Italian banks, and by the way, not just the Italian banks, there are others as well, by far and away the biggest challenge facing Europe, I would argue, in the next 6 months is the banking sector. And indeed, if they don't fix the next 6 months, then it will be their biggest challenge thereafter. This is really a big, thorny issue in the sense that it won't go away. There are too many bad debts and too little capital to support the sector, and yet the resolution mechanisms, the banking union rules that were adopted by the EU could potentially not only be destabilizing, say, for Italy politically, but they could be potentially destabilizing for the banking sector in big economies in the rest of Europe, including France and Germany. And being able to resolve those banks without creating those sorts of destabilizing issues is, it seems to me, paramount for the EU to address. So I'm shocked, actually, that finance ministers aren't addressing this issue.
You were shaking your head at a number of the things that were being discussed there in Brussels whilst Ryan was speaking. Larry, why would this be destabilising to other countries? Because some of the conversations we've had around the banking sector in Italy has been around the sort of self-contained nature of Italian finance, and it doesn't necessarily spill out to the rest of the Eurozone as other crises may have done.
I rather doubt it. Look at CDS on Deutsche Bank as an example of this sort of thing, which is to say, of course, that if you go through resolution, you will have to have some bail-in from creditors. In Italy, of course, the problem is those creditors tend to be retail, and hence the political challenges. Elsewhere, they tend to be wholesale, and it increases the cost of financing. Europe is trying to engineer a stable recovery which requires credit formation. The last thing that it needs is an adverse shock of uncertainty, and in particular, an impairment to the credit formation story.
But what wins there?
And it is around that they need to address this issue in a much more pragmatic way than the rules they have adopted.
So pragmatism will beat rules, you think, in this situation?
Unfortunately not, because the EU itself is a rules-based institution, and the lead voice within the EU on these issues, Germany, is very much a rules-based approach to things. So I think this is where the rubber meets the road, and I think it's grossly underestimated in many respects by markets that are, of course, now euphoric that Brexit has somehow been pushed to the side, that Japan's going to stimulate the world economy, and that it's all rosy for equities. I think this is a major challenge facing us as we enter the autumn.
So that effusiveness of the S&P at a new record high and the FTSE on doing its Brexit losses. And to put the BNP story in context, this is a bond issued for 2008, issued at 100 cents, now trading at 49 cents. Banco Montepaschi has issued 10 billion euros worth of bonds to retail investors, mom and pop bonds, a total of 180 billion. They can't bail in. Matteo Renzi can't bail in mom and pop and grandma and grandpa. Can't.
I would think that's also the case, particularly against, obviously, the polls that show his party now trailing the Five-Star Movement. And, of course, given the importance of the referendum, the constitutional referendum for October, which is about a different issue, but nevertheless could be portrayed within Italy as a referendum on policy.